feels like we're up close and personal, because it feels like that to me, I wanted to talk about difficult conversations about racism while getting ready. So I'm calling this Get Ready to Talk About Racism with Me. My face is dry, I just got out of the shower. I'm gonna start with skincare. And I've decided that I'm not going to talk about the products that I'm using. Maybe that's annoying. If you really want to know what a certain product is, just comment and I'll let you know. But I have a real admiration for the sort of handful of beauty YouTubers that I follow that talk about consumerism in the beauty industry and about a love for aesthetic and like beauty as being really wonderful and healthy and normal and like satisfying, which is kind of how I find it, but also, you know, can potentially lead to like really yucky financial habits and just essentially is like promoting consumerism, especially at like the rate that products are coming out now. So I'm not going to talk about any products because they're just products that I use and you could use different ones, and that would probably be great for you. I also, like, I'm not getting paid to talk about them, and unlike when it's like a local, like small business or queer-owned or black-owned business, we're talking about it is really like exciting because I want folks to support the brand. This is like a very sensorially wonderful experience for me, so forgive the faces. I wanted to talk about internet activism, which hopefully you're not seeing my entire boobs, which I think has gotten a bit of a bad rap, pretty unfairly. I think there's a lot of validity and importance to internet activism, and I'm someone who like has participated in it pretty extensively. I think, you know, as a disabled person and now as a person who lives rurally, it is definitely one way to engage with justice issues that feels a little bit more accessible for me, although it isn't for everyone, obviously. I've really sort of struggled with how much internet activism is about the performance of activism. And when I say the internet, I mean like YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat. I'm like exposing my age here. I don't know. Instagram, whatever the kids are using. And I should clarify further. I'm talking about white people. I'm talking about white people. I'm talking about white people doing internet activism. I remember back in like ye old Facebook days, finding a lot of like links and discussions on that platform really helpful in terms of challenging my own racism. I keep like hopping around trying to say something because it's really hard to talk about racism online, and it's also really hard to talk about internet activism without sounding like I don't respect it. And I think for white folks, when I talk about internet activism, mostly what I'm talking about is sharing things on Instagram. I see white people sharing things constantly. It's like constant, all day, every day. And I find that really, I don't want to say interesting because it's such a like bullshit, neutral, like useless thing to say. When I think about myself and when I used to share things on the internet, share things on Instagram, back when I had a private account, so not everyone could see all my shit, I remember feeling like if I wasn't in some way like using this post that I was sharing as a white person, which is very often like posts from folks of color, I'm not here to say that's useless. What I think is tricky is reflecting back on that as, you know, a person sharing in this private space. It was essentially like a closed loop, right? So people in my life who followed me tended to be people who shared my values and my praxis and my politic and like the way that I moved in the world. And so very often myself and 6 other people that I know would be sharing the same content, and it would be seen by all the same people. I don't know that it was doing much more than like flagging that it was something that was important to us. That isn't valueless, that isn't worthless. It also is more about you than it is about whatever you're trying to impact. Yeah, no, I believe that. Infinitely more effective, even if you just send that post to someone that you know and you say, hey, this really made me think of you, or I think you would find this useful, or I'd love to talk to you about this, or whatever. I find it almost cheapening, these like accounts and labor and commentary and lived experiences of folks who are experiencing significant oppression, to have 1 million white people sharing it on Instagram in their stories, and that's the limit of their engagement. One thing that we do as white people is think that that's enough. There was a long time, like years, where I basically said, I can't do this anymore on social media. I don't want to share anymore because this feels super empty. And this feels like it's about me and how I want to look on the internet. But I often feel like it's really echo chambery. I sound really judgmental. And I guess I am being judgmental, which isn't fair, but is what I'm doing. Maybe a general rule of thumb that I've kind of come to about sharing posts like that is that if sharing it doesn't make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, like if it doesn't raise a bit of a flag in terms of, oh, I wonder if I'm gonna, I wonder if someone's gonna DM me angrily. Like if there are no stakes for you, if you don't stand to lose anything by sharing something to like your circle of friends on whatever platform, then it probably isn't going to accomplish much. At some point, there started to be this conflation of like awareness is what needs to happen. For the most part, the awareness that needs to happen isn't on these platforms, right? It isn't over social media. It's with our grandparents and our parents and that really racist person at the corner store and, that teacher that said some really messed up things. And those people aren't going on our Instagrams and reading that and then like sitting with their own racism. This sort of like share cycle, I'm worried that it gives white people like me this sense of like being let off the hook, like, oh, I did my activism and like I'm sharing it. And again, I want to be as clear as I can that I'm talking about white folks on the internet. I am not talking about folks of color. I don't think as white people it's enough for us to share that to our stories and then call it a day. What I see is this paradigm of like good person on the internet versus bad person on the internet as a white person. So like as a good white person on the internet, you might share all the things. You might, engage with the commentary of folks of color and try to uplift their voices, and like that is all valuable. That isn't necessarily challenging your own racism. I got a new foundation. I don't know if it's going to match my face. Good white people on the internet know. They know what's going on. They know what they're doing. They know what's right and what's wrong. They know what's good to share and what's not. And I mean, I don't want this to turn into a conversation about cancel culture because that is like a doctoral thesis. What I do want to talk about is I think it's really damaging as a white person to posture to other white people and everyone on the internet like I know everything or like I'm on top of my racism. It's not something that I have to constantly work at. And that's, I think, that's the piece that I've always tried to sort of bring in when it came to social media. I really do think that in order for actual change, and when I talk about actual change, I'm talking about you as a white person having a conversation with another white person that might impact the way that they move in the world and might impact the way that you move in the world. I think that the only way that that can happen is through vulnerability and through creating a space where people can feel okay fucking up. And I really believe like it's our work as white people to create that space. Tiny shit mirror. I look orange. Oh no. Ah! Due to what we've created, which is this sense of like good white people on the internet do all this sharing and don't talk about how they do racism because they don't. They do. We all do. As white people, that's what we do. By the very function of being born white and going through our school system and having the parents that I did and having the experiences and the advantages and the privilege that I've had, I am constantly, whether I'm aware of it or not, perpetuating racism. And I feel like I hear so much from folks of color that's true. Urgency in sharing and showing how not racist we are. We're not like taking a pause to think about how we are racist. It isn't like all of a sudden I'm done doing racism, because it is fundamentally built into how our society works. It is the social structure of our society. It is built into our government. It is built into our healthcare system. It is built into everything about how we move in the world. That's a bit of a mess. I don't know that we can really ever do the work of changing any of the oppressive systems if we aren't first willing to sit with what we've built and how we profit from it and how we engage with it every day. And I almost feel like social media, white internet activism has devolved into this sort of deflection, which is I'm gonna repost. I think the people, at least in my world, and I would love to know if it's not the case in yours, in my world and the people that I interact with, they're aware. Maybe not in the same way that I am, and they might understand it differently. I'm talking about white people are aware. They're not typically totally unaware of what's going on. And if they are unaware, that's by choice, right? They are like consciously being ignorant about it because they don't want to engage. Me sharing a post on social media isn't gonna change that. Maybe here's how I would suggest we think about it. Racism as like a curriculum. So we're taught it in our school systems, and we're taught it sometimes by religious organizations, and we're taught it by our parents, and we're taught it on the bus, and definitely in our doctor's office, and definitely in the stores, and definitely in media. We are consistently, constantly, forever inundated by it. It is always there. It is the curriculum of our world, is racism, and is white supremacy, specifically. Anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, even more specifically. We not only need anti-curriculum about racism, we need to talk about what we've learned and how we continue to be shaped by this ongoing curriculum that is teaching us every day, in every way, how to maintain white supremacy. While I think engaging with, supporting, uplifting, amplifying, funding, all of those things are incredibly important to do in support queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color, I don't think that's it. Because it almost feels like we are consuming their work, and then returning to the status quo. We have to be willing to get it wrong, and we have to be willing to get it wrong to each other as white people, instead of making that the work of folks of color. Many years ago, I had attended this anti-oppression training in which the facilitator, who was a really intimidating person, talked about how, I think I was probably 20 at this time, and he started the session talking about how laughable it was that some folks couldn't understand or couldn't imagine a world without police, and I couldn't. And I sat there, listening to the group laugh, and I felt really alienated, and I also felt really confused, and it had been brought up in this way that didn't give me the space to not know. And I was so lucky that the person who drove me home, who was a friend of mine for a very long time, sat with me and was like, how was that for you? And kind of asked questions and checked in and gave me the space to fucking be bad at it, right? Gave me the space to not know. I needed the space to not know and to potentially look racist or bad or terrible, or in order to learn and to have this conversation about no, I can't actually imagine a world without police. I just want us to be okay messing up around each other so that we don't do it in a way that harms the people that experience that oppression. I wanted to talk about this while putting makeup on because I'm always keen to remind folks that aesthetics and beauty and appearance are not vapid, especially moving out to the woods and seeing no one. I have found it incredibly important before I leave here to take time to get ready, even if that's just I put on sunscreen and brow gel, and this sort of act of protection almost. It's like a practice in mindfulness of I am mentally and physically preparing myself. I had a conversation a really long time ago with a buddy about doing difficult work, and so at the time both of us were doing healthcare related work in quite emotionally charged and often painful crisis times for folks. And she talked a lot about how she had this amulet that was a certain stone that she felt offered her some protection. And that's not usually my jam, to be quite honest, but I was really struck by this sort of conscious ooh, I'm gonna be dealing with something really tough that potentially is not gonna feel good and is gonna hurt maybe, and at best is gonna be uncomfortable, and in order to prepare myself to best do that in a way that serves everyone, I'm gonna protect myself. Not protect myself in a way that's harmful to other people, and not protect myself in a way that doesn't hold me accountable, but I'm gonna prepare me for this hard thing. And I found, that even if it's not makeup, that jewelry has been really helpful for me in that sense. I am such a lover of vintage and antique jewelry, and I often stop and pause as I'm putting on jewelry and kind of go, is this the kind of energy that I need to bring to my day? I wish I could remember what stone this person was talking about. Ironically, I have it tattooed on my arm because I felt like I needed the protection too. Oof, this feels like so much makeup. The crux of this is that I want to pose some challenge to how we think about racism as white people and how we play that out, even if it's just in a social media space. You know, how does the way that I approach and talk about racism or don't talk about racism, I have tried to not have an opinion on social media and focus that energy elsewhere into having uncomfortable conversations with people. And then I moved to the woods, and that's become harder. And also, you know, I have a more public online presence now, and so I do feel like it's my responsibility to absolutely uplift and amplify and commend and acknowledge the labor and the energy and the like unbelievable patience that we are consistently granted as white people by folks of color who are willing to educate us, but also challenge this idea that like anti-racism is inherent to any of us as white people, because it's not, and because it is everyday work all the time. I wanted to be very bad at makeup for you. More honest about things that I don't know, and also be honest about how I often feel frustrated that I see so many folks sharing and, you know, looking to amplify marginalized voices and oppressed voices, people who've been made marginalized, but I don't see them interrogating like, should I have this hairstyle? Does that feel kind of appropriate? Or, you know, I've been saying yas every moment of my life, and like, maybe that's not my word to say, and why? You know, why isn't that my word to say? And just really engaging with the like the yucky parts. So I'm trying to look beautiful, but talking about yuck. Was I blessed with eyelashes that turned me into an instant Disney character? Yes. Hi there. Was this video very stumbly? Sorry, emergency. Cat emergency. I really appreciate if you have been engaging with the shit that I've been making. I really appreciate if you watch. I really appreciate if you like. I really appreciate if you comment. I really put my heart into this, and it matters to me. And I'm not too cool for that. I can learn from you, because I think that's the other piece. Learning is like two ways. It has to go two ways. And so when I've, you know, had conversations with people who don't share my politic, one of the things that I'm constantly reminded of is how there have been points in my life where those viewpoints made sense to me, and that it took my own willingness to like sit with how that was kind of yucky, and sit with how that really didn't feel good, and how that felt harmful, and how that played out in all the different areas of my life in order to change that behavior. And that so often, in order to have any of that happen, I needed to have someone give me the space to be bad at it, and give me the space to ask questions, and give me the space to think differently, because we're all being fed the curriculum. I think folks of color experience firsthand how untrue and unjust the curriculum is, and how harmful it is. And white people, we benefit from the curriculum.